we don't want to try to hide anything, and we've actually got to deal with that. That then raises the last point I wanted to make. This question of, as was explained, uh, proposals about compulsory specifications, because I think that the NRCS, what they do is they develop compulsory standards. Once they develop a compulsory standard that's signed off, no one in this country can produce or export anything which is under less than those standards. Uh, the fact that that standard was not ever presented to me about this, and I think it's obviously staring us in the face that if it had happened, we might not have had this particular challenge. Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But I think that what is staring us in the face is that the issues between our departments that have arisen because of a pushback from the industry, we need to rapidly and urgently address those and develop a compulsory standard for processed meat. I think that that is a pretty much a no-brainer at this point. So I think and I have actually indicated that to our Director General that this must happen now, sooner rather than later, and that the other work needs to proceed urgently. The quicker we can come to some certainty about the common thread, I think the better we're all going to be, because then we can address all of the issues that are outstanding, and those that are covered by the general injunction to consumers not to consume, which I think is still in force, it's very much still in force. Don't consume any uncooked processed meat, wherever it's come from, whatever factories it comes from, with the recall notices applying to particular factories where we have established that there is listeria. I think that that needs to be dealt with by as much certainty and as much transparency. That's the approach that we've been adopting, and I think that I wanted to just make those additional remarks. So let me just leave it there. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister, and your team. Honorable Minister Zokwan and your team.
Thanks, Chairperson. Thanks to honorable members, Minister Davis, Deputy Minister Buthelezi, and everybody. Maybe I'm tempted to start from where Honorable Davis ended, in saying that there is no compulsory standard set in the country to deal with listeriosis. And I will trace this back to the meeting we held with the different food producers on Monday with the Minister of Health, in which we came to an agreement around the issue of how to, one, we all agree that the loss of lives is regrettable and that it was not supposed to happen. And we further agreed that there is an urgent need to ensure that we create amongst the consumers a comfort that these products can be consumed, provided we have done work on the 100 companies that are still not closed down. But that will be done provided there's been a thorough work to ensure that they comply, that no listeriosis traces are found in their product. There was a proposal from the companies to say that maybe we need, from the academia, that we need to accommodate or use the international benchmark by the EU of 100 CFUs, that if it is in that range, listeriosis can be allowable. And the view that we all had was that that may be a good standard for the EU, but looking at our country, with many people with different challenges of immune, with the number of people who are pregnant, also with affected immune systems, as well as the fact that we have got other conditions in our country. Maybe the need, therefore, is for a committee that I think DTI has referred to, where there can be a team that's set out to do this work, comprising of all the people, to make sure that when we come with a standard, it is homegrown, it takes into account all the challenges, so that that standard then be the one that is used. As we sit presently, we said no amount of listeria will be permissible for products when they leave the company. Further, the question was asked, how do we boost and create because companies were concerned with the fact that there was a blanket call that no uncooked meat to be consumed, especially those in the piggery industry, as pig products have not been found to be comprising of this, and the fact that it is going to affect more your small-scale piggery farmers who could not withstand the current situation. And once those plants are closed or processes that are closed, farmers may be compelled to slaughter in their backyards, creating a bigger problem for health going forward. The agreement there was, can we meet very soon through a work done by our monitoring teams to ensure that all the 100 processing plants can be given a bill of health. Then a meeting is called where all the ministers can announce that it is now safe to consume those products, except from the 3 companies until they come on board and the proof is found that they have complied. I can say that I visited the plant in Polokwane and saw the work that they are doing, as they are trying to make sure that that plant conforms to the laid out measures. The second agreement was to say that given that as a country we've not done much work on listeriosis, there should be a task team that comprises the 3 departments to look at trade issues, to look at agricultural mandates and health, and come up with a program that addresses this, and as well as another grouping of the academia that should look at scientific and further research on listeria, but not limiting to listeria, because we've got other diseases like salmonella and others. So as a country, we come up with a clear guideline that says how do we ensure that our people are safe from consuming these products. And that was the understanding we left the meeting with, that one, there should be a program that makes sure that all the unaffected companies, I say so, those where nothing has been found, are rechecked to make sure that they comply. Where those companies have been closed down, are put back, but not pushed into production, provided they meet the set standards. Thirdly, a meeting is called to ensure that we can give the confidence to people that they can consume the ready-to-meat products, provided they meet the standard. The concern was raised again on the matter of mechanically deboned meat, as it is a source if it is not dealt with properly. And all those things come, and I believe when we left there, between the 2 departments, with the view that we will add the participation of DTI because there's a major role to play. We can go forward to say we have been able to be briefed thoroughly. We understand what listeria challenges are. Even the participation of the academia gave us a view that says there's more work to be done in research, but we need to work as a team as the 3 departments. And the issue of the role of environmental scientists who are currently placed in local government has to be looked at, and the role they should play in making sure that the plants are conforming, because you have to make sure that at the production as well as at the processing plants, the conditions conform, because contamination is a threat. So I can just come to that conclusion. Thanks, and I'm sure my team may add other issues I didn't spoke of.
Let's start with the acting DG.
For health, we'll do a short presentation because a lot of things have already been said. So can I move here and do the presentation?
Okay.
While the committee secretariat gets our presentation, I'm Jeanette Hunter, the Deputy Director General for Primary Health Care. I'm with my other health colleagues, technical people looking at food safety regulation, food safety enforcement, and we've got our international health regulations focal person. I've also got Prof. Lynn Morris, the head of the NICD here, and Mr. Govender, who is managing the Emergency Outbreak Response Center. So I'll skip over issues that were raised by the other departments. Also the general information on listeriosis, because I think that since the outbreak was declared in December, everybody is now familiar with this bacteria called listeria, and when it makes people sick, the condition is called listeriosis. Have you got it?
You can continue, ma'am, and use your presentation and refer members to the presentation.
Okay, so I think I want to refer members to page 14. That is an interesting graph that actually shows why listeriosis is not a notifiable condition in South Africa. It shows, it starts with the year 2013 and it moves to last year, 2018. And so it shows that it was a condition whereby we saw about 60 to 80 patients per year in South Africa in totality. But if you look at the numbers, what the graph does towards the right, when we look at 2017, especially towards the end of 2017, we could then see that we are really sitting with an outbreak, and this is why the regulations were changed to include listeriosis as a notifiable condition. I will also not go over the weekly report, but maybe I should say that as of 23 March 2018, we had a total of 995 laboratory confirmed cases in the country, so there is still a slight increase on a weekly basis. The slide on page 16 then shows the 2017 year. It shows when the condition became a mandatory notifiable medical condition, but it also indicates what the numbers have been doing since product recall, although it's still early days. Chairperson, I'm going to move to slide 18 and speak specifically to the NDOH's response to the outbreak, because the invitation letter had asked clearly that we speak about that. So as the colleagues from the DTI and the Minister of DTI and also the Minister of Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry already indicated, there was an immediate collaborative response when we as health were notified by the NICD that they were notified by the doctors in the environment that we may have a problem with regard to listeriosis. So there was this coordination, there was risk communication. The NICD continued with clinical and molecular investigations that involved targeted environmental sampling, and we then looked at our food safety records. Processing plant inspections were done, and we requested technical assistance from the World Health Organization, and they sent a risk communication specialist, an epidemiologist, and foodborne outbreak experts who analyzed our situation and made recommendations to the multinational outbreak response team in terms of how to take this issue forward. So we do have the multinational outbreak response team that consists of the relevant role players, but then of course the work of this team was to focus on this listeriosis outbreak. We also got the Public Health Emergency Coordinating Committee now to start meeting weekly to look at the problem of listeriosis in the country and to manage this outbreak. Colleagues from the DTI has spoken about what happened since a source, we don't want to call it this source, a clear source was linked to the ST6 strain, and thus that is the outbreak strain. Chair, I think I want to stop there because a lot of what we are saying came out in the DTI presentation as well as agriculture, and as you said, I think we should rather have some time for questions and then responding to the questions.
Thank you very much, Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. Minister has already introduced the issue from Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries case. What will happen now is that Dr. Mbisani, who's the Chief Director within Animal Production and Health, will give a further presentation, which will also be shortened based on the similar presentations that we have had. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Honorable Ministers present, and Honorable Dear.
Thank you very much, Ministers. Thank you, Chairperson, colleagues. As we have already seen, quite a number of issues have also been attended to by the colleagues from the DTI and then also from the Department of Health. So I will also try my best to avoid duplications. Our presentation starts off with an outline that I won't go through, and then it also gives a list of acronyms for the consumption of the members. But there are certain areas that we would also like to emphasize related to our role in this outbreak and what we have done up to so far. This slide has been talked to by our colleague from the DTI. I can confirm that we didn't plagiarize, and it just shows how much we understand the roles that each of one are playing in the food safety controls. And then this one too has also been talked to by the colleagues, but what I want to emphasize on this particular slide, Honorable Chairperson, is the fact that in addition to the municipalities, the Department of Health and the Department of Trade and Industry, we also have provinces that are playing a role in terms of the food safety controls. And in addition to the food safety controls, Honorable Chair, we also have assignees that are also helping in terms of the food safety controls, and I will explain further as to where we involve our assignees in terms of the acts that are relevant. Just to complete the whole picture, we would also like to speak about the regulation of pesticides and stock remedies which contribute to the food safety system. And then we will also emphasize issues that talk to importation, as the Minister has already talked a little bit about the mechanically deboned meat. And there is a myth that this Listeria outbreak might be coming from there, but we'll also try to demonstrate our role in terms of how we control the imports per se. There is a concept that is well known worldwide, that is farm to fork approach, wherein when we look at food safety, we don't only look at facilities, we also look at the farms in particular. So there are controls in terms of the Animal Diseases Act in live animals. Listeriosis can also be an animal disease, honorable members. And although it is not a controlled disease in terms of the Animal Diseases Act, the if there are increased incidences of the disease or prevalence of the disease at farm level, there is reason to be concerned. But Listeria can also be found at the abattoir, and the Meat Safety Act has got a role that they are playing at abattoirs, and that is to a large extent also a shared responsibilities with the municipalities. And there are also possibilities of finding Listeria situations in processing plants, shops, and restaurants. And then in terms of our legislative mandate, I think the other acts have been covered by the colleagues, particularly the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act, but there are also Meat Safety Act, Animal Disease Act, and to a large extent we also involve the police in some instances when there are roadblocks that are being established to search if the food that is being distributed is not food that has not been manufactured in approved plants. This slide attempts to also indicate the number of acts that the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries is responsible for. Animal Disease Act, Meat Safety Act, and then there is also Agricultural Products Standard Act and Farm Feeds and Fertilizers Act, Act 36. And all these acts have got particular measures, and then I will only talk maybe in this case on the Meat Safety Act on the specific deliverables. Slaughtering of animals, registration and monitoring of abattoirs, chemical residues, very important microbiological monitoring of meat, and then also export and import of products. And then those are the specific deliverables of the Agricultural Products Standard Act, which also talks to food business operators, and then export standards requirement, and then local regulations. And then Liquor Product Act, which is not very relevant at this moment, but of course as an act of that we are implementing, we thought we should include it in there. And then as I indicated, the Animal Disease Act, which looks at animal health per se, and then all diseases that are of significance are also looked at. Minister of Trade also indicated that there could also be concerns on fruits and vegetables, and maybe if fertilizers are used that may have the disease, it's quite possible that if they have not been properly produced, we can get some contamination there. The alignment that we have with other departments, we are also aligned with other departments on food additives, contaminants such as mycotoxins, and then HCCP, which is hazard analysis critical control path, and then maximum residue levels or limits, and then also labeling requirements. We collaborate with provincial departments, we collaborate with municipal health, and then we also collaborate with the South African Police Services, as I indicated. Just talking to the issue of MDM, the controls that the department is instituting, and I believe this is one of the most important slides for the consumption of the members. It is quite a busy slide, but all that I wanted to indicate is we do take certain steps to try and ensure that everything that we are importing in the country is safe, and particularly if there are first-time requests for permits. We don't just issue a permit. We just look at whether we do have a permit or not, and then if the permit is available, it means that we have done all the necessary steps, and then we do issue that permit. But if there are no permits, we look at the disease status of the country that wants to import to us, and then if the disease status is acceptable, we do accept the permit, we do issue a permit. But if the disease status is not acceptable, we further continue in terms of assessing the veterinary services of that country, and then we issue permits after a satisfactory situation has been arrived at. And as I indicated, that is basically the summary of this particular slide, and then it is highly animated, and I am just trying to show the process that we follow, particularly if we are dealing with a veterinary services that is of of unknown status. But on the other hand, we also do not issue a permit if we believe that the risk is too high. As background to the current Listeria outbreak, honorable members, just to confirm what the situation is, we had believed that the Department of Health would cover this part. We understand that there have been a total of 995, and we know that it's about a 69%, and then we also understand that there has been up to 183 people passing away up to so far. And then despite the fact that the participation has been increased from the point of view of monitoring, and then also trying to resolve the current situation, we participate with the Department of Health, and particularly on the Public Health Emergency Coordinating Committee. We also participate with the multi-sectoral outbreak response team, and we participate in a number of other committees that have been established up to so far. This story is the one that has been talked to by a number of people at this moment, and I won't repeat the figures that have already been mentioned by our colleagues from.
You have 2 minutes to summarize.
Yes, just also to emphasize the issue on the monitoring, post-import monitoring of particularly mechanically deboned meat. When a consignment arrives at our ports of entry, we do collect samples that we take in for microbiological quality, and then there are often two decisions that we take when particularly MDM and other products arrive at the ports of entry. It's either, if we are not happy about the microbiological quality, we reject the consignment and we send it back to origin, or we if it is something that we can deal with, we take in that consignment for treatment as prescribed until we are happy that it is safe. But there is that process that we are following. But if the consignment is of satisfactory standard, we do release it for usage in our factories. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Ministers. I think I rushed through the slides per se to try and stick to time. Thank you so much.
ARC, you want to add?
Yes, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity. Honorable Chair and members and honorable ministers and deputy ministers who are here, DGs who are here, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mtutuzile Makadlela. I work for the Agricultural Research Council. I'm Group Executive for Animal Sciences. I've got next to me Itumeleng Matle, who is a food safety scientist. He and I will add a thing or two to the presentation that was given by Dr. Modisane. Just a couple of things that I would like to bring to the fore. One is that what we are seeing with this outbreak is really the tip of the iceberg. We do have a food safety problem in this country. Whilst not trying to downplay the impact of the current outbreak, there are also other foodborne microorganisms that are looming large over us that are waiting to strike any time. Listeria may be the one that's most troublesome in terms of fatalities and so forth, but you do have more common ones like salmonella and all of that that may cause a lot of discomfort and all of that and losses to the economy that we should be taking into cognizance as we try to deal with pathogens that are inherent in the food that we eat. Perhaps one other thing that I should share with you is that we did conduct a study between 2014 and 2016 as a ARC. The manner we went about doing it was to look at over 2,000 meat and meat product samples that were collected across 9 provinces and 3 ports of entry. The samples were tested for listeria, amongst other foodborne diseases. What we found was actually shocking. There is listeria in just about every food establishment, whether it's a processing plant or a butchery or a retail outlet, it is there. It is there in processed meat, it is there in raw meat, it is there in ready-to-eat meats. It is also found in vegetables, avocados, and all of that. It is all over the show. It is found in cattle. Sorry, Minister. It is found in pork as well, and in poultry, and even in game meat, but not in huge quantities in game meat. It is found in just about all the provinces, and the point we are trying to drive home here is that we have a huge problem as a country. We need to coordinate all our efforts to keep our food safe. I know now this job lies in all sorts of departments, lies with DAFF, DTI, the municipalities and all of that. We need a better coordinating mechanism to try and protect our people. We are looking at a problem. I'm not trying to be a scaremonger here, but it is a problem. Itu, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. Yes, intelligent scientists will add a thing or two here.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is Itumeleng Matle. I just want to add the role of our institution during the Listeriosis outbreak, the role in which ARC played. At the time of the outbreak, NICD contacted us. We were only institution in the country that had the isolates. We had about 296 isolates of Listeria monocytogen, which was used to trace back the source of Listeria. So we send those we send those samples to NICD for whole genome sequencing, and we believe that the data that we gave to NICD, if we didn't have it at the time, they would still be looking for the source, because it kind of like guided them in terms of where to look for the source. So that was the role our institution played in terms of the outbreak. And we realized that during the outbreak, we were not capacitated in testing of this organism, especially Listeria monocytogen. So we had to quickly develop SH to detect the bacterium, which most of them are not accredited. We're in the process of doing so. This raises a concern that if any other foodborne pathogen can strike outside the Listeria, we still have not have any accredited method except Salmonella and E. coli, which facilitate the fact that we have to look into other foodborne quickly before we are in trouble. So that's what I want to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ARC. Honorable members, that was the presentation from both departments. The ministers of one. What is that?
Just to clarify one matter that may not have come through. Listeria its presence is almost everywhere. Even if you read your own teeth, you'll find traces of Listeria. It is the amount and the immune and the thereof. I was trying to raise that. But because of the system that you use in the processing, I have been now educated to understand that if your end process is heating, because when you heat or you cook your food, you are able then to kill most of these bacteriums. That's why it is more prevalent in chicken products. If the Magadala didn't come clean to be defending a piggery section, I'm just saying that among the foodstuffs that were seen to be containing Listeria, there was no pork, even beef, because the system they use in the heating stage assists in that. For instance, if we were to eat raw meat, raw chicken, we would be sick from salmonella. And that is the clear, what saves us is because we cook what we eat. But in this case, because the processing of chicken products, when it is cooked to eat, is just that you use the cold system. So my own short course at that processing plant assisted me to understand briefly. Pork products do not possess Listeria. If it came crossed like that, pardon me.
Thank you, Minister. I think I want to remind members that in February 2016, we gathered in this room and we've called all the scientists to talk about food safety, security and food safety. And the department, all of the department were here. I just wanted to remind you on that. And I was listening to the presentation. Minister Davis, I'm very worried about this norms and standard, because at the time they came here and presented that those standards, they are still preparing them, and in February 2016, if you remember, those who were here will remember. I just wanted to remind us that I think what is important is to look at how do we manage the communication, and I'm going to allow honorable members to interact with the presentation. And ourselves as Parliament, we're supposed to have done other things after that workshop to make sure that together with government, because we have in that workshop we've identified issue of food safety as a problem of the nation. which include us as Parliament, that we have to do certain things because we've identified issues of legislation in that workshop and all those things. I'm going to now allow honorable members to interact with the report, and I'm noting Honorable Malloy, Honorable Stein, Honorable Kapa, Honorable Mapanga, Honorable. I've seen the row is, you've raised the hand with the row. You'll follow one another. Let's start with Honorable Malloy, that side, and then come to this line. Yes, Honorable Malloy.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I want to agree with you that, firstly, like you said, from the 2nd to the 3rd of February 2016, we had that workshop in the same room, and we had a discussion around food safety. Now, one of the reports we received from the department was that there is a food security agency in place, and we were informed that its main responsibility is to improve state capacity to prevent, detect, and respond to food security problems. That was in 2016. And now we are talking about listeriosis, which is a serious problem, and so on and so forth. Where were these structures? Were we unable to do this work in order to avoid what we are facing as a country now? Because there's a serious problem. As soon as you lose so many lives, it means there's a problem somewhere which must be attended to. So I just need to be clarified on that one. And those committees, Chair, you know, they made an important recommendation, which I'm not sure as to whether those departments which were there do that thing. That, for an example, the intergovernmental working group must invite all franchises, retailers, and so on and so forth under one roof to address the issue of food security. Did we have that exercise? And what was the outcome of that exercise? Because many years ago, that is 3 years ago, we identified that there is a problem, and that's why these recommendations were made. And as we report, honorable ministers, we are not referring back to what we discussed previously and so on, and where are we, in order to avoid all these things. And you know what the ARC is reporting is it's a bit scary. It's a bit scary. And we'll need to attend to this matter, because they are saying they conducted this research 2014, 2016. And I suppose the outcome of that research was shared with responsible departments. If it was not shared, it is shelved somewhere. Why is it shelved somewhere? Because you need to share it with responsible departments in order for them to respond to what your research is saying. So where is that research, and what are we doing about it? Now, Chair, the problem we have basically is that we sit in meetings, we take decisions, and there's a problem with implementation. And you know, more often than not, I always say that people sleep on duty. People sleep on duty. Because if you don't sleep on duty, it means once you discover something, you do something about it immediately. If you don't have capacity, you tell us that there is no capacity in order for us to attend to that capacity problem. Now, there is something which was raised by the Department of Agriculture when they spoke about mechanically deboned meat. I thought that they will go into details on that one. You know, I'm worried about our port of entry. Do we have the necessary capacity in our port of entry? You know, you can report all these nice things. I saw that the DDG was giving us a slide which was very busy as to what is that they are doing with imports and exports and so on and so on. But do we have capacity in those port of entry? Are we certain that the cause of this listeriosis the cause of this is it not of what we get from other countries? You know, in the previous meetings, I've said that one professor from Stellenbosch, for an example, was saying that what we get from Brazil, particularly your mechanically deboned meat and so on, might be the cause of this listeriosis. Have we responded to issues that are raised by other people outside government, your NGOs and so on, your universities and so on and so forth? Are we sharing this information together with them? Because those are our universities. Whatever research they do and so on, they need to share it with us and so on in order for us to act on those things. Are we having that interaction? Or are we working in silos to deal with these things? Because I can tell you now, or am I too long, Chair? Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. Let me pause. Okay.
You know, in my meeting, you don't meet the presenters. They are this side. In this side, you ask questions and get clarities and.
Okay,
no, Honorable Stein, I'm saying let's use the line because it's Malloy. Let's follow, and then it's then you'll follow, and then you'll come this line. Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. Listen, let me also follow my colleague, but I won't be long, promise you. To both ministers, I wanted to find out something that whether our systems today are they able to talk to each other? Because that can be another problematic where people are meeting once there is an emergency. And then also, in terms of the consignments, which is coming, you are correct, Chief. I wanted to find out whether our structures are equivalent to the task. I will put an example. I will sound very destructive, but the reality. Do you still remember the issue of water person in the past? Whereby some of the things, it was discovered, some of these things are man-made, are not natural. What is the status quo at the moment? Because there were a lot of speculations about that. Some people, they wanted to sell us meat, like chickens. And then there was a squabble between us. Yes, Algoa wanted to sell us chickens. And then there was a squabble between us and other people. After that, here comes some of diseases left and right. So from the researching point of view then, have you made any follow-up on that one? What is the real one? Is it artificial or is it natural? And then lastly, in terms of what was raised by my colleague, is that I wanted to find out about the issue of abattoirs. Do we have a data? Because there is a problem again, like legal abattoirs and illegal abattoirs. Only to find that some people are busy in the bush slaughtering and sending meat everywhere in the country. Do we have a number exactly? Are we able to do a proper audit on our abattoirs which are already there? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, thank you for the presentation from ARC. You know, Chair, where I'm sitting, I think I'm more scared than before. In our portfolio for health, I don't remember the things that were presented by ARC being presented. In fact, we thought NCID is the one who discovered listeriosis. We thought like that. But when, sorry, it was said like that, ne? Yeah, I'm correct. And you know, now I'm becoming more worried, Chair, because this is another life estimate. This is another life estimate. And I'm becoming more worried when ARC has presented their research regarding where is this Listeriosis found. But the minister is telling us about something else regarding about pork, coal. Yeah, you know, I'm worried because you see the scientists, Chairperson, they won't come and present something that they are not sure of. These are people who are highly skilled. They know what they are talking about. We are politicians. We depend on information that we are given by the same people. But now, if minister is saying if bacon was not mentioned in the workshop, and when they are saying it's part of cold meat, and sometimes if bacon is more dangerous. I was even saying now, Chair, in the breakfast room, that they are giving us bacon and there's listeriosis because they don't fry it well. Remember, they just do it like this very fast. And Chair, there's a problem because it seems health and them, they're not communicating. And the way health has dealt with listeriosis and the way they are explaining it now, I'm becoming more scared. It's like we're sitting with a time bomb. I think here what we need is for all these departments to sit together and deal with this matter in detail. Because doing top and tail, you know, in this thing, when you don't do thorough thing, you do top, we used to say it's a top and tail. You must go and do this thing, deal with this matter very urgently and take it very serious. Because there are other cases, maybe, Chair, that are not reported. Because the cases that we're giving now, that we have 180 deaths, I'm not even sure. Because over the weekend, I saw 2 children from my family. They just started vomiting, diarrhea, and so on, and we took them to the hospital. And I'm you know, at the back of my mind, I was afraid that maybe it's this listeriosis.
Can you?
I'm just saying, Chair, the coordination of departments is very critical in this case, because my fear is the litigations that government is going to be faced with is the worst one. Other people will just come and say, no, it's not a stomach ache. In the clinic, they just gave me this kind of medicine, but I suspect it's listeriosis. And there are other people who are very opportunistic outside. So in coordination and dealing with this disease, listeriosis, into detail, Emma departments working together, I think it's very critical. Because I'm scared where I'm sitting now.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Stein.
Thank you, Chairperson. I want to echo what my colleagues have said. I think, Chair, firstly, unfortunately, I was a few minutes late. Did the Minister of Health make an apology? He did. Okay, thank you. Chairperson, my concern is that listening and also doing some research about this, I'm informed that Listeria is found everywhere, in soil, in earth, and whatever. And it was interesting, one of the presenters from DTI, when he made a point about canned meat and the process that it's undergoing, that you can't find Listeria in there. Fine, but it's on the can. So that might have been the thing that happened with the bologna. No one has convinced me yet that the ST6 was found inside the bologna in the factory that we closed down, rightly so, because people died. I'm not disputing that point. The point that I'm trying to make here is Listeria is everywhere. If we are now going to go on a witch hunt and close down everything and everyone that moves, and every time that we find Listeria on any product, what are we going to sit with in South Africa? That's why I'm trying to find out what is our response to this. How are we going to deal with it? Because I'm told that if you test fruit and vegetables, you'll find it on there. So are we closing down fruit and vegetables now? How are we going to deal with it? I listened to Minister Rob Davies, and that was also one of my concerns when we started closing down or recalling products from different factories all over. My immediate thing was, but then something introduces it in there. We haven't found that something that's introducing it into our factories, which we manufacture. So I want to find out from any one of the departments who's dealing with that. Firstly, maybe can I find out who is testing now? We are looking for the common cause. Who is in charge of that? Which department firstly? Which labs? And do we have the capacity for that? Because I'm told it's quite expensive, Chair, to do the breakdown, that the genome sequencing, whatever the very grand words are that we use. So who is responsible for that? The second question is, and Minister Zokwana, you said there's about 100 companies that's not closed. I met with many of them. They can't produce. People don't buy because the Minister of Health says all processed meat. So no one is buying. We are sitting with a crisis. We don't know where it's coming from. We don't know what is causing it really. It can be anywhere. It can be fruit, it can be vegetables, it can be water. Factories is closed down. Those that didn't close down can't produce because people don't buy. We've caused a bit of a chaos. I want to agree also with the Minister of Health that people are now going underground to slaughter and sell products because they can't do it through the normal system. How are we dealing with that? How are we going to fix that? We can't sit with a situation now where we cause people to do things illegally, so there's less testing happening. I wanted to find out, I was told that sales of processed food in South Africa is down between 50 and 70%. And it's not only food, it's things like spices, packaging, people that's doing the transporting, the logistics of selling these things, going up and down the country, all of that. So the whole value chain is busy tumbling because of recall of all processed foods. I've never heard of something like that. Why didn't we recall a batch or say all this? But you know, that hysteria about everything, I want to find out who was responsible for that decision, that we could just recall all processed meat or don't eat it. I also want to find out, linked to the question about life Isidimeni, looking at that graph that luckily stayed on the slides there. It's June 2017. The minister, I think, made his first announcement in December. What did Department of Health do? All the others, that's all responsible, these nice interlinking, lots of departments that all have something to do with testing and health and food security and health security. Since this June, when we started seeing that spike, because it was not just 1 month, it kept on going on. What was happening physically on the ground from that time? What did we do to start tracing or find out what is going on with this increase in spiking, so that we can start getting the source of the problem? Then Chairperson, from the Department of Agriculture, also in the imports. I am not convinced about the testing of products coming in. Again, I think we need and I see someone is shaking their heads. I need a document to show to us how many products that come into the country, and I think let's start focusing on Brazil, since there was a ban now on Brazil, certain factories from imports from Brazil. I would like to find out firstly what was stopped from Brazil, why did we stop it, and then if, Chair, we can get a list from the Department of Health or Agriculture. I am not sure who's supposed to test the imports. It sounded like that column, it's Health. What did we test? How many batches did we test? How many samples were taken from in-stage? What was the result of that? And then lastly, Chair, I think it is of utmost importance that we set interim standards while we are looking at standards, because that's another thing I can't understand. We close down people, but we don't even have standards. So how must people know what is the standard supposed to be if we don't have standards? It's really mind-boggling, Chair. So can we look at interim standards to get it up as soon as possible, so that at least businesses can start up again under certain standards, understanding what is it that they need to, the requirement needs to be, and then this overarching food security that we were talking about, where is it?
Thank you very much. Honorable Mapanga.
Thanks, Chairperson. Greetings to the House. Chair, I think I will adhere to your instruction. I will be short and precisely. The response to the Listeriosis outbreak by the DTI. All this recall for both Tiger Brand and RCL happened after there were reports of casualties nationwide. Nobody took time to inspect their product before they left shop. No precautionary measures were taken, forgetting that the people of this country are protected constitutionally. So therefore, due apology must be met and fines be paid where need be. The question is, will the victimized family be compensated? And I also want to know what really happened from the Tiger Brand affiliates like Enterprises. Where did they drop the ball, or where did they lose it? Because all along, there's been no outbreaks. What system have they been using before to ensure the safety of the population against food poisoning? I submit, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good mornings to everyone, our ministers and deputy ministers. Chair, much of what I wanted to ask has been asked already. I will limit my questions, one, to some of the economic impact of the recall of the products in relation specifically to wage earners, whether in particular Minister Rob Davis, TTI, have considered the issue of some form of wage subsidy, whatever initiative to allay or to compensate or to provide a means for those workers who are now at home without an income, so that their family indeed can survive. Chair, my work have already emphasized the issue of collaboration broader than what we have today, Chair, based on workshop presentations that have been done here in this committee before. I would want to emphasize that, Chair. Then just lastly, one do understand that listeriosis is everywhere, as ARC have indicated. Minister, you also, Comrade Sugana, you've mentioned that, but it has to do with the levels, Chair. Now, it says that if you are immune compromised, then you are a likely victim. Now, Chair, I wanted to find out, have there been some form of the profile of the 186 people who have died? Have their profile been investigated or analyzed to see whether they were indeed conforming with being immune compromised? Because one could easily find that that was not the case, Chair. And if it's not the case, then of course alternative assessment or analysis matters must then be developed, Chair, because then it means it's not only those that are immune compromised that are easily targets, and then everyone is a target, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Kachalia, a crisis always brings into relief what should have happened in the past and what we need to do in the present and going into the future. In terms of the past, I think questions need to be answered very cogently, given that listeriosis is not new. It's happened before in other countries. Knowledge is not new, the crisis is new. So what has been done about this and other potential pathogens across the various responsible bodies to ensure that we don't have what we are currently facing? Now let's move to the present. In terms of the present, I think it's important to look at the timelines. The ARC and honourable members here have pointed out the timeline stretching back to when the responsible bodies met to look at these and broader issues. But I'm interested in what happened between the 4th of December when the task team was initiated and the 4th of March when the source was discovered, and you know what exactly happened and what measures were taken other than recall notices, and when was the recall notice put out. In terms of I mean, this effect is not only on the lives of people, of 180 plus people, but it's also effects, as my honourable colleagues here have pointed out, on the livelihoods of people going forward. I mean, this is a 20 billion rand industry, and that doesn't include, as Honourable Steyn has said, the entire value chain, which will boost it considerably. 20,000 jobs only in this particular industry, 2,000 jobs lost already. The spice industry is losing 30 million rands, according to themselves, per month in terms of lack of inputs. This, on both sides, of the loss of life and the loss of jobs, I'm sure will not be lost on both responsible ministries. However, what the response from the Minister of Health has been to say, let us not touch any non-cooked meat. Now, this blanket knee-jerk reaction has fueled the crisis and not particularly been helpful. This is a bit like, you know, I mean, perhaps he ought to look at the hospitals under his aegis and say that people with minor and mid-injuries shouldn't go to hospital because they might die from superbugs and the parlous state, not to say filthy, of our hospitals. But that's beside the point. Or maybe it's not beside the point. So I'd like to know exactly, let me just give you, before I get there, that it doesn't only affect large players. It affects small players. It affects people in our townships, informal traders, and it affects. Yesterday, I met with a gentleman from KZN who happens to be Chief Albert Thuri's grandson, who is active in this particular business. He employs 153 people, and he's about to close his business if this continues because, as Honourable Steyn has said, that there is no demand. So, what exactly has been done? I'd like to know. We've heard a lot about the processes that are in place. The processes that are in place, frankly, have failed us. So let's find out what has been done to fix those processes, not put them up on slides and say this is the wonderful process we have, because they've got us into this position. What has been done to fix those processes, and what has been done to deal with the specific crisis at a granular level, both in consultation with industry and the various scientific bodies? And what plans are put in place to ensure that there is no further loss of life and the impact that we have seen and have outlined in terms of the individual livelihoods of people? A specific question in terms, for example, is there a monitoring tool in place to look at and prevent the outbreak, further outbreaks in our townships, in our informal traders and our rural entrepreneurs? These are important things. Can we move in this direction? Thank you.
Honourable Member.
Thank you. It's Honourable McPherson, Dean McPherson. I'm the member of the Trade and Industry Portfolio Committee, and I am from the outset disappointed that none of my colleagues from the committee are here today. But I want to focus in on, except my colleague to the left from our party. But I just want to focus in on the DTI's role, Minister, during this process, because Mr. Mamadisa came to us and had put on the table a couple of weeks ago about discussions and how they'd been mandated from the health department to develop these health protocols on processed meat, And a long story short, basically, it came down to an issue of levies, and so nothing really came of that process. And through inquiry, what I found out is that the reason why the levies were rejected is because of the weighting per kilo that was put on them, and it was 60 cents per kilo. Whereas if you look at canned food, which is what the NRCS also tests, that is 10 cents a kilo. And I can't understand why there was such a huge difference between those products to test them. And at the end of the day, you know, the health department simply and I don't know what the DTI's position was at the time, basically folded their hands and said, you know, well, we'll let the industry self-regulate. I think we need to understand why there was such a big difference in those levies, and why they actually weren't negotiated to be more reasonable. But what we also need to understand is, you know, are we subjecting imported products to the same testing as we are doing locally? What is the capacity at the ports to be testing products that are coming in from other countries? And you know, I'm sort of concerned that there seems to be a very sort of stagnant approach as to, you know, how do we actually get to what the real source of listeriosis is? Where is it actually coming from? We found strands of it, obviously, in these factories, but we don't know where the origination actually is. So until such time as the origination of the strain is found, it's going to continuously pop up in other places. Does that mean that every time it is found, and from what I'm led to understand, that there is listeria, you just can't get away from it? But it's how it manifests itself. I mean, are we literally going to keep factories shut because it's going to continuously be there? And I'm not clear in my mind how this process to get factories listeria free can actually realistically be achieved, if it is going to be continuously found, and without actually knowing where the source originally comes from. So if I can just be taken through that process, I'd be really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the chairpersons of all these three portfolio committees, because I did the request and I'm happy that this meeting is taking place. I really appreciate that. Chair, having listened to the presentation and to many people, my colleagues said that we are sitting on a timing bomb, and it is clear that we are facing a crisis. But what is important is how we deal or how we respond to this crisis that is facing us. Chair, I do understand that some of my colleagues, they talk about Brazil that we are making business with, but it is clear that in Brazil, listeriosis is not a notifiable disease, which means they are exporting things that are contaminated. So maybe we need to be told exactly what is it the DTI is doing to control that, because it's not a notifiable disease in their country. Chair, I hear that municipalities are involved in terms of monitoring compliance, and they are really assisting. But according to South Africa Institute of Environmental Health, it is clear that as a country, we have 3 times fewer number of environmental health practitioners. So in other words, we don't have enough people to help us to do the job. Because according to the World Health Organization, they recommend the ratio of 1 environmental health practitioner to 10,000. But now in South Africa, it is 1 to 30,000. So it is a problem. So which means there is a capacity problem. It's unfortunate we didn't invite COCTA to be part of this meeting, but they should have been here. But my question is whether the municipalities, were they given the clear guidelines with regard to when this outbreak occurred, and whether the municipalities, are they having the capacity to deal with this, because they're supposed to be going to different places to do the checking of the safety standard. Are they doing that? Do they have capacity? My other worry, Chair, if we remember, many of our municipalities, they've got a problem in terms of finance. They can't even render the municipal services. So some of the municipalities, they were saying that they can't even employ these environmental practitioners. So how do we expect to do this this job if we don't have the people who's supposed to be there? So that is my question, Chair. And even those that are in the municipality, who is monitoring to see that they are doing their responsibility? Because if you remember previously, these environmental practitioners, they used to be with the Department of Health. We used to call them the health inspectors. So the Department of Health used to have a direct monitoring to see whether they are doing their job. But currently now they are with the municipality. Is that overseeing of monitoring of their capability in terms of what they are doing? And even their training, is there any monitoring in terms of their training? Are they registered with any health professional body? That's what I want to know, Chair. But thank you.
Honorable Kapa.
Thank you, Chair. Mine are brief. One, as it seems that this listeria has always been there, and therefore, what causes this outbreak, this one, if there has been, it has always been there. Two, I also learned that it is curable and controllable. Then what has been the shortcoming in that makes us to have these deaths that are there at the moment, which we would like not to be there? At the moment, where are we at the level of control? Are there any reports that this listeriosis is happening in other countries, especially those whom we trade with? Just for our information, because maybe they won't be reporting to us. Now, the recall. Do we think the recall has been effective and efficient? I'm also worried about this one because I just saw something which was posted on the social media where, after the mention of the recall, a lot of people were picking a lot of stuff from the shelves at extremely reduced prices, which tells you that the person who was selling decided to get rid of it instead of recalling. And also in that part, I also think maybe now what has been done to communicate this to the consumers more than the producers and the traders. The consumers themselves who know that this is something which is dangerous to their lives. Do we have any demographic statistics? I think this is linked to what Honorable Mandela was saying. Maybe to know whether the trend is that this is predominant in poor areas or in rich areas or in rural areas or in cities. Maybe that trend could assist if we can see that maybe these are the practices or tendencies that cause this within us. Then, lastly, what is required of us? I didn't find much recommendations on the presentations. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable.
Thank you, Chair. I want to deal specifically with the Department of Health's report because there's issues of concern that I raised there. And I want to start specifically at slide 9, which stated that after the listeria was diagnosed in the Western Cape in 1977, and that it's regular. It occurs in our hospital, 60 to 80 cases a year. If I go to the graph that's actually now currently up on the screen, I want to ask the following questions because only on the 15th of December 2017 did we amend the list of notifiable diseases, okay? And that was a notice that appeared in the Government Gazette on the 15th of December. If we have a look at the graph that's currently on the screen, and it's quite alarming, in actual fact, We first started to see the peak of this disease in 2016 November. Was for the first time we actually had a bit of a shoot up of those figures. 2016, not 17, 2016. By March 2017, we were already at half the reported cases of the annual report is norm. The annual norm was 60 to 80 cases per annum. In March, we were on just under 20 cases in 1 month. Just under 20 cases in 1 month. By July, we were peaking. And of course, then by June, we hit 50 cases a month versus before that, the 60 cases a year. My question then rises, why were we so slow to react? When was the MNORT informed? The meeting was held on the 4th of December with the MNORT. 4th of December. But we peaked in March, April, May, June, July. We were already at basically at outbreak reporting stage already. Why did it take so long? Only in July 2017, doctors from neonatal units at the doctors, not the Department of Health, the doctors at the 2 hospitals reported that we had a problem. That was in July when it was already at outbreak stage. I have concerns of that. When was the MNORT actually activated, and when did the clinical and molecular investigations, the NICD, actually begin? And then it talks about, and I'm talking about slide 19, targeted environmental sampling with the National Department of Health Environmental Health Section. And they started to investigate food safety records. Listeriosis wasn't checked for, and there was no standard for it. So what food records were we investigating? What sampling were we now doing? And when did this take place? And I think one of my biggest concerns is when was the Public Health Emergency Coordinating Committee established to deal with listeriosis, and who was part of the core team? But on page 20, slide 22, and this now gets to the core of where I'm at. The investigation of the Poloni manufacturer Enterprise Foods production facility in Polokwane. ST6, Listeriosis monocytogenes, was detected in 28 environmental and product casing swabs. It was not found in the meat. That's what that statement says. The meat was not tested. It was found in the environmental, what you're going to find anyway, we're aware of this, and product casing swabs. It does not say that at any stage the listeriosis was actually found in the meat. It was in the packaging. And that's a concern for me, because I don't think that has been communicated to the public at all. It was a mass recall. And that was a concern for me. It took a year from the start of the peaking for the minister to announce an outcome of the investigation. That is concerning. And I want to go to the National Department of Health's food control role. Food control is a mandatory regulatory activity of enforcement by national or local authorities to provide consumer protection and ensure that all foods during production, handling, storage and processing and distribution are safe. This is a role we presume is now in the hands of municipal environmental health officials. What exactly do they check for? We need to know. When they were going into enterprise and all the butcheries and all the containers, what were they testing? Because they were not testing for listeriosis. They were not testing for listeriosis. Why? Because it's not communicable. It wasn't an issue. And that's a problem. And that goes back to slide 28. The Department of Health's sole role in the Consumer Protection Act is to check nutritional labeling, that the nutritional labeling is actually correct, the Codex contact point of Infosan, an emergency contact point, and rate alert system for food and feed contact point. There is nothing in there as to what the Department of Health's role actually is in the Consumer Protection Act, but obviously National and Environment Health Inspectors must be part of the Consumer Act because it is their role that ensures the prediction at production. And I want my learned colleague here next to me actually raised this point in terms of safe disposal of all the recalled products. One of the examples was, and the EFF is here, the EFF rushed into stores. They rushed into stores and they cleared the shelves of every enterprise or fast pre-cooked food product. Everything. Where the hell did it go? If you go out and dump this anywhere and randomly, there are people out there who are starving. This country is full. We've got 135 children a month dying of malnutrition-related diseases in this country, and mothers who are desperate to feed them. You go and take that product out of the stores randomly like it was done and dump it wherever it bloody suits you. Somebody who's got a starving child is going to be prepared to take the risk. That is a concern. And just privately, lastly, thank you, Chair. I really think we need to push for an independent body to regulate food safety and security in this country. It needs to be an independent body. We've got 3 departments here, all involved, all cross doing this, all higgledy-piggledy pie in the sky. I believe we need to set up an independent body to coordinate this correctly. And I think, please, Chair, we must request uniform standards for the industry and reiterate the call for interim standards right now to keep the situation under control. I thank you, Chair.
I'm going to give Honorable Chair of Health, before you speak, let me clarify the issue of the meeting. This is meeting of agriculture. We have invited other portfolio committees because it was scheduled in our program. So I just want to clarify this one. Honorable Chair.
No, thank you, Chair. My name is Lindelwa Donjwa. I'm the member of the Portfolio Committee on Health, the chair of that committee. I have been, and my apologies for being late, Chair, there's something that I was dealing with. And I may have missed some of the presentations, and bear with me if I repeat what I said. But I was not intending to ask questions and clarify, to ask questions, but I think there is a need to clarify some of the issues. First, there is a need to commend the National Department of Health of ensuring that listeriosis is notifiable. And maybe it is important that as public representatives, we are empowered when a particular disease is then clarified as being notifiable. I'm not going to do that because that is not for, but I do think, Chair, is going to be important so that we all understand why. I don't want to say we may be seated here in this closed room and TB is all over. In this closed room, as we are seated here, it's all over in this room. What are we going to say? We're going to say we're on a time bomb. So that is for me, I think that is very important. 2, that is why there are doctors, there are health workers, there are laboratories in the country and doctors. Obviously, it is not the National Department of Health that make diagnosis and tests. It's doctors at the workplace. It's doctors at the workplace. So we can't ask a question, why the Department of Health didn't do ABCD, the National Department of Health. Doctors are to inform it was correct of those doctors to sensitize the National Department of Health or whoever authorities, laboratories, to say, wake up, there is this that we have picked up. Listeriosis is curable. I think that is to be made clear. It is a curable disease. But I am not implying that because it's curable, it can't then be an outbreak. That is to be managed. That is why then it was then classified as a notifiable disease. My last recommendation is so that we don't create a panic. You know, maybe because I'm a former health worker, you can go to any lab and request them to take any swabs in you. You'll find that you are harboring some bacteria. That is comfortable. But when your immune system, I'm saying comfortable because it doesn't make you sick. When your immune system is compromised, whether you are a diabetic or you are HIV positive or you have got TB or you are a pregnant woman, no, a child, that's why those the neonates were picked up. You are then bound to be, you are vulnerable to any type. But it's important, therefore, that in particular as public representatives, the question is very important that the coordination is to be tightened. And therefore, that's why I want to make a recommendation that maybe the agricultural, what is this? Yeah, must come through you to the nation, to the maybe to the portfolio committee to take us through on some of the issues. The very last thing, nobody spoke about it, which touches on a recommendation. The ABC of health in terms of what we're faced with. The ABC of health, the hygiene, how food is to be kept in our own homes, in our own refrigerator. And therefore it's going to be important that scientists take us through how long should I keep my fruit, how long should I keep my food, what are the dangers of when I have defrosted my meat, I re-put it in a fridge, in a refrigerator. Scientists must take us through on those so that we are not being scared by high-powered DM ministers and DM, by high-powered scientific language, when at the end is the ABC, is the washing of your hands, is the ensure that you cook, and as the as the portfolio committee on health, among other things, those are the things for us that we think are very important in the farming, in the farms, people that are dealing with how are they empowered to understand that they are to wash their hands? How are they empowered to understand why they are to wear protective clothing? I think that in another time, Chair, we must, but I think it has been empowering process, and I hope we will then have the next round of really now looking into how best do we empower our, without being being emotional about it. How do we ensure that we empower our people? Because it can't be more of factories that are closed than empowering our people to know that this disease is a disease, this bacteria is there. What do we mean by a bacteria versus a virus? And how then do we, why are we saying it is a curable disease at the end? I thought it's important to raise some of those things so that we live here knowing what is it that we are to make our people understand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Before that, Chair, sorry, when you see me leaving, I'm not undermining your meeting. I've got some to leave. Thank you.
Honorable member, I thought you didn't want to speak because I've given you chance, you didn't respond. You can respond. You can question. You can come with your question.
Thank you very much.
Please don't respond to honorable members' issues when you were saying EFF, so that
No. I can never stoop that
Okay.
down. True. And thank you very much. I just wanted to say, as the chairperson of health talked about being informed or educated about keeping, like for an example, food in the fridge, that reminded me of an education and or awareness program to our society, because it's important that our society be included in being educated on this, and how best they can, what is it that they can do to prevent this disease. And more specifically, our learners at schools, because we, in all schools in South Africa, we have vendors, we have people who are selling food to them. They also need to be educated, and we also need to have environmental specialists going out to schools to make sure that this is carried out to prevent, in actual fact, the further outbreaks thereof. So my question would be, are there any, or was there, or is there going to be any plan that is going to be rolled out specifically for educating and making everybody aware of how to prevent this disease? Thank you very much.
Before I give the ministers and the team to respond, I want to deal with some few issues. One, I think we're not going back to the issues that we have dealt with in the workshop, because I know that when people are angry, we want to go back where we. So we are in agriculture, fishery, and forestry. We are moving forward. We are not going back. The issue is, as you respond, ministers, those tasks that you have agreed in the workshops to tighten the system, how far are you in those tasks? Two, with environmental practitioners' help, in that workshop we have deliberated on the matter, and we said that it's a problem that it was premature probably for us, because we have participated as parliament, because we've changed legislation, of changing legislation to transfer those environmental practitioners to municipalities, and looking at the status of the environmental expert that you have, don't you think we must relook on the issue? If there is a need for us to take the matter to a law reform commission, we should do that, because it was done because of our constitution. The constitution directed that this function must go to municipality. In the reality of the situation, we see that our own municipalities, they are unable to perform the task. Is it not proper that we should look at other, whether to take the matter again to Law Reform Commission to advise whether we should revert the issues to health, because it's more health practice than environment, because washing hands and all those things, it's more health issues, ABC of health, than municipal activities. I'm just saying, let's look at that. And the issue of the policy, at the time we're meeting, there was no final decision, the finalized policy on safety policies. Have we finalized the policies? And in terms of closing of companies, I think it's a wake up for all of us. I think Minister of Health, without condemn, we don't have to condemn him. actually is practicing any parents will do if you lose children. So it's upon all of us to now to rise to the occasion and say, how do we stop this, including those big companies, because at the time we were discussing, we had those companies in the workshop, and we had agreed that this is a problem of everybody. Let's go and practice the ABC in our workplaces so that we are able to deal with the issue of food security safety. It's critical for this country. I agree with ARC. We have to deal with it as government tighten its system, but those companies have responsibility to give our people safety food, because we are about to build a well-being human beings here. So I think they have responsibility. So it's a wake-up call for all of us, including them. They should not say Minister of Health, blaming him. Let's blame all of us that we have not done what we're supposed to have done. If we have responded in February, probably you would not have those other issues. I think that's where we must move. That's my own view. And I want to, the department, as you respond to other questions, touch on issues that we said for us to be able to protect our own people against. You remember when we discussed this issue, there was a donkey meat in our backers. There were donkey meat in Boerewors. You remember those stories? Kentucky is washing meat on the floor. You remember those stories? And it's not that these companies they are not doing wrong things. They are, most of them. So unfortunately, for you to deal with the environment, you have to, the example that you find, you must handle it and correct the mistakes. So let's tighten the system, but at the same time, those companies has responsibility. And I agree with all members who said, let's then create norms and standards, because they want to be babysit. Because it's babysitting. If you sell things that are not of health importance to our people, you want to be babysit to produce or to process good food for our people. It's very wrong. So let's babysit them and give them what's supposed to have, and so that we have we've dealt with the issue. And again, I will recommend to the three ministers that from here, what is needed is to call is either a summit or a colloquium, deal with this issue of food safety, and conscientize all these companies. And if they are not aware what they are supposed to do, let's remind them, so that we don't have, because it's got all the prawns, the queens and prawns. As you close these companies, you lose jobs, more poverty, people are going to die of hunger. So it's got all those challenges. So that's my suggestion. Who wants to start? Minister Davis?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I want to say that I think we find ourselves in a situation which I think is really much akin to what investigators do when there's an air crash. We need to establish all the facts, and we need to act on the facts, and we need to improve our systems. I think that's essentially where we are. I also want to say that I think that we need to strike the balance that I think many members have talked about, and that is the balance of ensuring that we don't create. We've got a problem of listeria, not hysteria, and I think that we need to crack that balance. Having said that, I do want to defend, I think, the approach that was taken, because I think that what has happened is that we've gradually moving closer and closer as the evidence is taking us to what indeed it is that we're confronting. So I would want to say that I think that when we do have, well, we have to strike a balance. Where we have to err on the side of the safety of our people. I think that's the first thing. So when we got that information from the Minister of Health, we didn't know where it came. As a number of people have said, there's listeria everywhere. It could be in vegetables, it could be in meat, it could be in something else. We don't know. And I think that the warning that was given at the time was appropriate. And the warning was there is an abnormal incidence of listeriosis in South Africa. We need to react to it, and there were various warnings of an educational nature, maybe not communicated enough. Wash your food, you know, take care, all of that. And I think that was appropriate, and that was correct. I mean, even though it had the implications I mentioned, Rwanda banned our fruit and vegetables. Even though it had that, I think it was correct. If we had attempted to hide it when we came to these factories, whether you start to discover that there actually is an abnormal incidence of listeria in the products in those factories, whether on the packaging or in the meat, I don't know, that somebody else can answer that. But it's an abnormal incidence, and we didn't communicate that, then I think we're in the life Esidimeni situation. Then we're covering up, and we're trying to act as though we just move ahead without communicating transparently. Then we would have been in a situation. I think that, so we had to communicate that. And we had to communicate the more general issue, because I think you were talking about the food labeling. What we've got in the world today is we've got these value chains of offal. And it is containing, people were saying at that time, there was kangaroo, there was donkey, there was water buffalo, I don't know what. And these things are internationally traded value chains of different kinds of components that go into processed meat. That's essentially what it is. That's what we found. And that when you start to label and say, is this donkey meat, or was this kangaroo meat, or whatever, that was the difficulty you had. It's all mixed in. You can imagine there's like a global mincing machine and everything's thrown into it. That's what you get. That was the problem that we've got in the world. Now, I think that the next stage, as I was mentioning now, the next stage, and taking the analogy of an air crash investigation, science and evidence has got to guide us. Science and evidence. Members have mentioned all sorts of things about mechanically deboned meat. Well, it may well be, but we don't know. We haven't established that yet. We've got to establish that. If it is mechanically deboned meat imported from somewhere, that is the golden thread. Because I said, what is the golden thread between RCL in the Free State and Enterprise Meats in Polokwane? What's the common thread between them? Now, if it is that there's some particular product that they're using in common, both those factories, and that is the source of it, we need to establish that. When we establish that, we must act. That, I think, is the thing. So there's a piece of scientific work. And I think that as we get more and more information, we become more and more precise, and we're able to then assist in not getting mixed messages. The other thing I think that we need to do is we need to support and encourage rehabilitation. That's what it's about. So those factories now are going through quite literally a cleanup. And if that cleanup then starts to establish that they've got acceptable conditions and systems in place, then that's fine. Then we must support them in the rehabilitation. But I said also we've got a national issue, and we better come to terms with that. That you know, there's a view about South African processed meat in our neighbours, in maybe other parts of the world as well. And although the percentage of our total exports is not very high, as a, you know, for particular factories and traders and workers, it's quite significant. So we need to make sure that we can hold our heads up and say that South African exports of processed meat are quality meat. I just said if we have an outbreak of listeria in some other country and it's traced back to South African products, we're in big, deep trouble. So we need to err on the side of making sure that doesn't happen. Now, I think that's the journey that I think that we need to be on. Are there lessons and things like that? And I'm just going to speak to the DTI. We do not have a system in place where every single container, every single consignment is going to be rigorously and thoroughly tested. It doesn't happen in any other country. You would never be able to engage in international trade if it did. There are even World Trade Organization rules about trade facilitation. But sample testing and stuff like that can and should and does take place. But I think that and there's no difference if we have a national specification. There's no let out for imports. The same applies. The difficulty that we have, I mean, I'm talking about other products now with the NRCS, is actually intercepting the stuff at the borders, finding where it is, because their mandate is also to intercept and to destroy and to send back or whatever cargoes of substandard products. And they're a very, very important institution because we need to keep out substandard products, both because they are harmful to our consumers and because they are unfair competition to South African companies which are actually complying. Now, I think that what I can see is that the normal process, as was explained in the presentation, is when they make a recommendation for a compulsory specification, it comes to me and I sign it off, and then thereafter they enforce it. All the ins and outs of what happens before are not drawn to my attention in a routine way. In post hoc work, we discover there were issues about, I don't know, I mean, Honourable McPherson was telling me things I heard for the first time about fees, but I knew there was a pushback on the industry. And I've already told the Director General that's I don't want to not know that kind of stuff. If there are issues where we can't get a compulsory specification written because we need it, because there are issues and there's jurisdictions and it goes to one department or another, that's the sort of thing we must sort out. So we do not end up in this kind of bureaucratic mishmash, that we actually write these standards. And it's pretty clear right now that we need to write a standard for processed meat, like urgently. That's what we need to do. Now, a lot of the actual research on the origin, a lot of research on this sort of thing doesn't come from institutions of the DTI, so I'm not going to comment on that, except to say that I do think that that needs to happen. I'm trying to also defend what I think we've done up to now. Unfortunately, it's been blunt. As the research takes us further forward, we can start to be more precise, and we can start to support the rehabilitation of companies that are concerned. I think the very worst thing would have been for us not to have done that, not to have done the recall, and then then we would have been finding situations where bit by bit some of the information would be coming out, and then I think that there will be no doubt litigation, there will be no doubt class actions. I have no doubt though that if we'd done that, that government would have been paying a ton more money, and we'd have been in a much more of a serious scandal if we'd done that than doing what we've done. So I think that there are things to be done, plenty of things to be done. I support the idea that we need to have a summit on all of this. Let's get everyone on board. Let's make sure that South African producers of any product, including processed meat, meet requisite standards. And if somebody is contaminating our products because we're importing the stuff, let's stop it, and stop it decisively. I think that's fundamentally what I am bringing to the party on this one. And yes, let's make sure that we act more cohesively than perhaps we have done so. Although I do want to say that when the Minister of Health drew this to our attention, I think we were there pretty quickly and responded pretty effectively to every bit of information that we had up to now. Thanks very much.
Minister Sokwan.
Thanks, Chairperson. I concur with the points raised by Minister Davis, and I would like to say immediately this was brought to our attention, the level of the outbreak, and the action we taken. Our teams were brought together, and there's one coordination at that level. And in the meeting on Monday with the stakeholders, we agreed that one of the areas we need to look at is the capacity that has been raised. And we agreed that one of the areas we need to look at in terms of funding is the funds that are made available. It is called a levy on food, or food levy. That maybe that levy can be used to fund, because we said that of the 100 processing plants that are not producing because of the hysteria on Listeria outbreaks should be examined to check if they meet the set standards. And if they do, there should be therefore a national coordinating program that brings back the confidence of the consumers, provided we're sure that there's no listeria. The debate that came was, at what level of listeria would you say a company has got a clean bill? The agreement was there should be no traces of listeria when the material leaves the factory. And the companies agreed. But again, they were proposing that there should be an adoption of the EU standards, which is 100 CFUs. And we said, no, that may not be relevant to our own situation. Then the call was, let's get the scientists, let's get the departments, let's get everybody to work around so that we come up with a standard. I think that is coming up, Chairperson, nicely from you. And I agree to say that as leaders, we need to give guidance, even in times like this. And I don't blame the minister for even recalled other myths beyond what, because we're dealing with a crisis. Have we been selective when to find that what we left out was not? And when I speak about pork products, I'm not saying this because I am the Minister of Agriculture. Is what I have been informed that up to now, no pork products have been found to contain listeria because of the processing. I want to repeat that. But I understand again and agree with the report from ARC and other bodies to say we have a problem of dealing with these diseases or possibilities thereof. You look, there are quite a number, and the question is, how do we ensure therefore that we take a lesson from this outbreak and we begin to coordinate at the level of the trade departments, as well as make sure that yes, there was a question of why don't we use the academics. They were there. There were professors on that day who gave our inputs. And we value their inputs because it is informative. But it must include, therefore, a broader view. But let me say again that, Chairperson, when the department tried to monitor and inspect abattoirs, there was a great resistance from companies who threatened to take us to court. It's not a question that companies are angels in this situation. What are not things you need to harbor on when we face a crisis like this? I agree to say we must find a way we rehabilitate those 3 companies that have been closed and make sure that they come on stream, provided that. On the issue of where will these scientists and environmentalists should belong to, we agree that we need to find a way where all those scientists who have been transferred to municipalities are brought back to the Department of Health. But the process of doing that may have to tweak the issue of the construction thereof. We all agree that if we don't deal with the situation at plant as well as company level, as well as food produced, we'll still sit with this. So we agree to say there was a crisis, there's still a crisis, but what we have done have shocked the system. Everybody now knows. We could have done it better in terms of communication. When you deal with a crisis like this, sometimes you may find that you could have been better if the situation was not as it is. I think as at ministerial level, we have to find that leadership role, that the ministers should lead in the areas, but we must work collectively to ensure that we come up with the remedy, not only limited to listeriosis, dealing with other diseases or processes that can bring up other fungal substances. And if we can do that and make sure that our people, but I agree the key is, in this case, people must understand what is the role of each and every one of us. As I handle food, are my hands clean? Contamination can happen beyond manufacturing. It can happen in your own house. So I'm saying, therefore, Minister, Chairperson, I'm sure the reason we're here is not to defend what could have. And I always believe that when we look at the history, what we'll find is a particular error. But the challenge is, how do we find processes that can lead? The Minister of Health raised the issue of the possible litigation. And he advised the industry to say, let's look at life as it means. What could have happened if everybody who has got a next of kin who died there have gone through the route of litigation? Vis-a-vis where you had the ombuds. I think ombuds, advice led to the process led by Judge Museneke. In the process, there was a process that was harmonized, that created a view that even those families didn't feel that you can imagine a poor family who would litigate. It would depend on whether she could or he would be able to garner the best lawyers. I don't think that is the area we need to look at. I know very well in the mining industry, and I know one of the law firms who was eager to say, I'm going to take, I know what they have done. They are sharks in terms of how they have done. Is how they have, by the way, eroded and bankrupted the road agency fund. We need that system, Chairperson. I'm sure we need to find a way, as this committee I would plead, to give the ministers to say, go back, come back and report on what should be doable, as well as our senior officials, so that when we come with a way forward, is what we can implement. I think we have learned our lesson.
Health?
Chair, thank you. Specifically with regard to the question, what did health do since June 2017 when the spike is seen? The spike on the graph, yes, corresponds with the action of the doctors in the field. They then notice that a larger number than usual of laboratory results that come back shows that the patients who they are treating has got listeriosis. They informed the NICD. The NICD chair, because this has not been a notifiable condition, had to go through the laborious task of analyzing records from the labs and isolating the records that shows a positive for listeriosis, and then profile those people. So this graph that we are looking at is a graph that the NICD built retrospectively. Then by the end of the November, they felt they had enough evidence. Minister Davies rightly referred to the fact that we need to use scientific evidence to not go into a scenario of hysteria. So they then used the evidence to inform the minister. And this is when the minister announced to the nation that we have an outbreak. I'm going to link this response to the response around the M0, the multinational outbreak response team. When was it activated? This is a body that always exists, Chair. The cooperation between DTI, agriculture and health did not start with listeriosis. We use this platform to constantly work with each other. Towards the end of last year as well, we had international experts come and inspect South Africa in terms of our readiness in terms of international health relations, and these departments work together closely through a body such as the M0. So when the outbreak of listeriosis was announced, the M0 then had to start focusing on that. They meet monthly, but they are supported by the other body that is called the Public Health Emergency Coordinating Committee. That's more a hands-on committee that meets every week, and this is the committee again with input from all the relevant departments, including the other two departments here with us as health, that guided what has happened since the outbreak was announced and to where we were, where we found some conclusive sources. The other issue of whether there's enough environmental health officers, no, there are not enough environmental health officers. And again, health has got a full report in terms of international norms, what we should have and what we have. But you could talk about this in any other area. Do we have enough psychiatrists? Do we have enough pediatricians? And so we look at the whole burden of disease and we go to the Treasury and we make our annual cases to get more resources to resource all these areas that we need more staff on. And also there was a question about whether environmental health practitioners at local government level get the guidance that they need. Yes, we have regulated norms and standards as the National Health Department. The environmental health officers working at all levels, but especially because the core of the workers are at local government, has been trained in terms of that. We have annual inspections and then we write the recommendations of our findings to COCTA and to SALGA as well and to the local authorities. And so that also links to your question, Chair, which is a good question. Should we relook at where the function lies? And I'll leave that with the leadership. And the honourable member from the EFF has asked about what do we do to educate communities. We do have a communication plan about health promotion in general, but now with this outbreak in terms of listeriosis in particular. And we cover all the media, but especially local stations, so that this information is shared in local languages. I'll stop at that, Chairperson.
DG Ramaswamy, where's he? Well, can you go through those issues and then followed by those issues that you're supposed to have done from February to now? You still remember them?
Yes, Chair, we have got a list of issues that were supposed to be done by the 3 departments. Let me allow Dr. Mlisani just to run through the issues that were raised in the committee, and then I'll wrap up with the issues that the progress report.
Thank you, TG, and thanks, Chairperson. I will try to respond to the issue of capacity at the ports of entry, although I believe that Minister Davis has to a large extent also indicated that we can never say that we have enough capacity at the ports of entry, as we are not expected to be testing each and every consignment that arrives, but we are taking a scientific approach and we are sampling. And then the sampling that we have been doing up to so far in terms of particularly imported meats and meat products like MDM, we have been applying a procedure that has been adopted, that is published on the departmental website in terms of standard operating procedure. We are constantly being challenged on the strictness with which we are testing and then subjecting all these imported meats to monitoring. But the emphasis, honestly, honourable members, has been on coliforms, Salmonella typhimurium, and Salmonella enteriditis per se. But because now the Ministry of Health has now declared Listeria a notifiable disease, we have included Listeria in that SOP to look at what is coming in, and we are hoping that this will also be helping us in terms of knowing exactly where we could have imported the ST6 Listeria from. I just want to maybe emphasize one point that also came, that Honorable Mandala also, I think, raised. He indicated that it is important to speak of levels, and that will also talk to the presentation by the ARC. Even if Listeria is said to be omniprevalent, it is normally not found at levels that would cause disease in humans, in animals, and wherever it is. But because we didn't want to talk too much about the organism itself, about how it is able to survive harsh environments and so on. If a conducive environment is created, it grows to an extent that it causes diseases, and that is where the element of levels of contamination come into play, and it can survive in fridges. And that is why in most of the products, according to the national standards, there is also always a sell by date and consume by date. And then some of the products within the constituents of the products can support the growth of Listeria, and the Listeria can grow much faster in those products that is why, ministers and chairperson, there is always a differentiation between a ready-to-eat product and a product that would be in a position to support the growth of Listeria, wherein it is very important that the products are stored at the correct refrigeration temperature. Otherwise, if that product is to support growth, it is very important to also observe the sell-by date and the consume-by date. So that is where the socio-economic issues will also need to be looked into, because sometimes we consume products after the consume-by date, which may constitute a serious challenge. The reference on Brazil, Honorable Chairperson, the plant in Brazil that has been said to have not been conforming, we have spoken to our counterparts in Brazil, and they have indicated that there had been problems in that plant, and we have agreed with Brazil that we are not going to take in any products from that company. Brazil had, in any case, voluntarily informed us that they are not going to allow them to export to us. Just to conclude, Honorable Chair, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Minister, I may also indicate that on the sidelines we have also been speaking to our colleagues in the region who have been unfairly removing some of the South African products from the shelves, to notify them of what the situation is, and to request them not to remove unfairly all those products that have not been implicated in the Listeria outbreak. And Minister has said it, the two ministers have already said it, but also Minister of Health emphasized the fact that the factories, the three factories or establishments that have been suspended by now, they have to clean up and disinfect, and then come back to the ministers to inform the ministers that all is well, and they will be reopened and they will be supported. Thank you, DJ. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me indicate that there were a few taskings that were given when we appeared here in February 2016, and I'll only relate to the two macro level areas that we needed to look at. One of the issues that was there was the fragmentation of food control authorities, and the view was for government to have an establishment of an interdepartmental food safety coordinating committee, which is currently looking at the following issues. One, systematic review of frameworks for food safety and food control. Two, the draft National Food Safety and Food Control Policy document, which will also include a roadmap of food safety and generally food control in South Africa, and then carrying out a feasibility on the integrated model of governance for food safety and food control in the country, and also oversee the development of norms and standards for food safety and food control in South Africa. Chair, I can report that similar to what I've reported previously in the portfolio committee, that the progress in these areas that we have set ourselves to do is very slow, pending a few issues that we have got to sort out, especially when it comes to the current fragmentation that we are having in the system. And therefore, what we would like to request is that we would like to report dealing on the work that has been done on all of these areas, but it's very slow. Unlike what I've reported, to say that when you look at the quick move that we had in terms of the border control authority and you compare with the work that we have done on the food safety authority, in comparison, food safety is going very slow. The second area is the high level decision to ensure strengthening of food safety, and this is a cap memo that is meant to then coagulate everything that we have done on the 4 areas into now setting up of that food safety agency, and this is dependent on the work that we conclude on the 4 areas, Chair. And once we have concluded that, we'll be able to then move with that cabinet memo to set up a food control agency. Those are the areas, Chair, I thought were very important in terms of the areas that we had discussed on the 16th, and these areas, as Chair would also recall, were the areas that Chair had also instructed. They become part and parcel of the food security policy of the country, and as led by the DPME. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. DTI, you want to add? Oh, you're fine. ARC? Oh, yeah, DTI.
Yes.
Oh, can you? No, there is another hand here.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify the question that was asked by Honorable McPherson on the levies. The process entails doing a socio-economic impact assessment, and then we determine the cost of regulation. So that will inform us how we then set up the levies. So we cannot have same levies for every commodity that we regulate. So hence we have that distinction between canned meat and processed meat that we were proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Perhaps some of the statements that were made need to be put in perspective. Our research work and surveillance efforts are meant to inform policy and monitoring and regulatory work that is done by largely the Department of Agriculture. This is what we are trying to do, rather than to be scaremongers or to be championing a particular cause as an interest group. Certainly not. Listeria is certainly everywhere, but it is the quantities that count, as everybody has already said. But what ours is to point out where the potential problems are, because often companies trying to push productivity or to reduce costs, they cut corners, creating an environment for microorganisms to proliferate to levels where they can cause problems and diseases to human beings. That is what we are trying to do, nothing else. And then, interestingly, perhaps something that needs to be shared with this committee is that contrary to popular belief, the sampling that we did with chicken that came from places like the Netherlands and Denmark and Germany had a little more listeria than chicken that came from Argentina and Brazil. These are interesting things. We are dealing with a very, very interesting organism. This listeria, you go to bed with it behaving like this, tomorrow it morphs into something else. Sometimes strains that are innocuous, that are not known to have anything, you expose them to detergents, they change into something else that is deadly. So it is an organism that we don't understand fully. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, you wanted to say something?
Just in response to Honorable Kachalia, who asked when the recall notices were done. And I think I did cover that in my presentation, but just to repeat, it was done immediately after the NICD made available the test results. And it was on the same day that the minister had called, I think it was the 4th of March, Sunday the 4th of March, when the minister called the meeting and then to make the major announcement. It was prior to Minister's announcement, but subsequent to the NICD releasing the results. Thank you.
Honorable members, any follow-up question? Honorable Stein, Honorable Bosen, and Honorable Mukopan.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the answers, Chair, or the replies. Chairperson, I think for me the important part is listening. I think it was Minister Davies that says that the factories need to clean and then we can open up again. Clean up to what? Because there's no standards. I think that is what I want us to come out with, Chair, after this meeting, that at least there's interim standards then. If we are not using the EU regulations or what, something must be put in place. Because you can't say to them, clean up to zero. I don't think we will ever be able to get to zero because there will be something. So I think we need to get something to clean up to, so that we then start from there, because it's impossible to say just clean up. Can we come up with something that at least after this meeting we can say there's some kind of agreements that we can then hold people responsible for something up to, but we can't just say, you know, clean up, but to what? For me that is important. The questions that were not answered, where I asked that both Rainbow and Enterprise, as far as I can understand, are exporting to some of our neighboring countries. If we are then not testing for things or properly testing for things imported or things that we use locally because of capacity problems, at least I'm sure we're testing things that needs to be exported. So Rainbow and Enterprise, that I'm using them because of the two factories that were closed down. Did we test them regularly over the last year for things like Listeria and the other bugs that's running around? Is it that not a requirement? I don't know. I'm asking this question because, you know, if we didn't pick it up, at least if they were then exporting, something must have been picked up. Or what are we testing then when we export? And then I would like to know the factories that we've now closed down, that we are not importing from the ban from Brazil. What products did we import from them before we put the ban in place? And then I also did not get the answer, who is responsible to find the source, that testing side of it. Minister Davis, you spoke about the thing that is in both, you know, all these cases. I'm trying to get back to your exact words, but I think you will remember.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chair. Also, request for an answer with regards to the fact that ST6 was found in the environment and product casing swabs. I was never informed that it was not in actual fact found in the meat, which was important to me. Secondly, I just want to ask, we have tremendous, highly qualified food scientists in South Africa, either in the various universities or working in various sectors. How involved have we got our local food scientists? They study the conditions in South Africa continually. They're on top of what happens in South Africa. That's what they do in this country. Are we getting them involved? And to go back to your comment, Minister Davies, we've got to cut bureaucracy. This has created a lot of the problems, and it goes back to our associate on the other side there saying that this whole process is very, very slow. The establishment of this food safety agency is taking time. It's slow. We're not where we should be, and again indicated that it is bureaucracy. And this creates tremendous problems in this country, not just in this field, but in other fields as well. And it reiterates my call, please, that we actually need to get an independent body so we can cut my French, cut the bull, cut the bureaucracy, and get on with the task at hand instead of who's responsible for that, whose fault was this, why is it there, why wasn't it there, what did we do to stop it? Because when you've got so many departments involved, you're going to entirely slower process. Whereas if you're working with somebody independently, the job at hand will get done. I think that's me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, according to the ministers who are here today, they also indicated that there was a meeting together with the companies that were affected. But something that I remember in the media, the companies, they were claiming that they were not giving the results. They never see the results. Is that something that you also discuss in your meeting? Because they were saying that they are just told both the molecular investigation or whatever was done, but they've never received their written results to say, this is what we find. It was just a verbal thing. Is that so? Please explain to me.
Maybe I can respond to that, Chair.
Okay.
Because we had meetings with both Tiger Brands and with RCL. And on Monday, the 5th of March, it is correct that RCL had not yet received the official results from the NICD or from the Department of Health. I can't remember if it was Health or Agriculture, but that there were undertakings that it would be given within days, and I cannot remember if it was in fact given. I don't have that information, but I know that they didn't have it, but undertakings were given to have it provided.
Ministers, want to...
Thanks, Chairperson. I just want to come to the question as to, at what, if there is no standard, how do you decide when? The agreement that we reached with everybody present, with the scientists, because there's no standard, no product should lose to leave the processing part with any traces of listeria. That's why there has to be done work, to be done zero. Because we couldn't say if it's 0.1 or 0.6 or whatever. We said zero. But we said we need to make sure that we fast track the program of coming up with a standard at which list, and that must be based on scientific research and information. It's not a number we can just suck and say this is the number. And all the processing, most processing companies were represented and they were present. It was the understanding. Hence we said, let all the companies that are not able to sell now because of this fear should be examined. Once they get a clean bill of health, then we can announce to people that it's fine now, you can consume the products. Of the three, I agree. We need to fast track the program to bring them on board, provided they meet as well the standards. I mean, what has been agreed upon to be.
Minister Davis.
Well, I think that we've already agreed that we need a standard for processed meat that doesn't only deal with listeria but also deals with food safety in general. That standard was under development, I said, and we heard all the issues. I think that one of the lessons we need to take out of this is we need to just ride through all of that, and that we need to establish that standard ASAP, and that standard must apply. I think that's the obvious one on that. We don't test. No agency in the DTI actually tests, and those are some of the agencies in under DAFF. But it's not very normal that you test for export. There are various requirements in individual countries who test imports, but I think that clearly our approach to other countries and neighbouring countries and so on is not one where we were trying to get them to take our products, which we think are risky in our own market. That's not our approach. Our approach is to be responsible exporters, even if countries don't have those standards in place. I think the message has been, if, for example, they're dealing with our vegetables and our fruits and all that kind of stuff, is to communicate to them that that's not the issue. The issue is in processed meat. And then I think, our bodies, agencies that fall under all of us that deal in this area, the NRCS and the SPS bodies in DAFF, they all have a mandate to deal without fear or favor. I don't know what an independent body means in this context. I mean, these are bodies, agencies that have got. I mean, we don't have enough resources for them. Maybe we could do more if we had more. But I think that these bodies are all bodies that are staffed by professionals, need to be staffed by professionals, and you know, the fact that they're in the public sector is because you know, nobody else is going to do it, and we have to do it. We have a responsibility as government. So I think that those bodies are all, I think, appropriately mandated, I would argue. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the response, and I think it was a useful interactions. All of us. Oh, health. Okay. DAFF still wants to speak. Okay.
Chair, no, the honourable member repeated the question twice, and I think we had thought Minister Davies had addressed it in the first roundabout. Was the ST6 actually found in the food or in the casing? So when the kids got sick in Soweto, and we traced it to it was the actual polony that had the ST6, and then that was traced to food outlets, where previously unopened products were then tested, and the ST6 was found that, and then from the outlets, I don't want to mention supermarket names here, it was traced to the factory in Polokwane, where in that environment was then found the ST6 as well.
Acting DG.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm apologizing because I will have to clear a few things in terms of the coordination, and my colleague DDG from Health has already outlined what transpired during that period when we got this the elements around listeriosis. There were a few statements that were indicated from the ERC point of view that I thought it should be put on record, that the coordination when it comes to this aspect of listeriosis, the center point is the Department of Health as led by Minister Aaron Motsoaledi. And the isolates that were sent through from the ARC going through to the NICD were a product of work that was done by the departmental inspectors and the veterinarians who collected the samples and submitted them to a lab of the ARC, and those went through to the NIC. So the work that is currently being done is work that is of many departments, but with the center coordination coming through from the Department of Health. And I just needed to say that, Chair, for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Acting DG. I think we are empowered as members on the disease itself. It's everywhere. But I think what is emphasized by members, one is the continuous educating our people around what they must eat, what they must be, how they must behave. I was laughing with the chair of the health that we were sitting in the table, now we're patching up papers, and we must at the same time eat. I'm not sure whether we'll be having the same problem as we live here. And this thing is out of perception. But if health workers educate our people properly, they will know how to behave and how to carry themselves in handling these issues. That's the first thing. The second thing, ministers, because you are here and the message should go to your colleague, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. The issues that raised by Acting DG emanated from the workshop of the Parliament on food safety, because we were worried about this the discovery of donkeys in Boeravors and in the beggars and all those things, and says there is a need for tighten up securities in the country for food safety. And the department, when they came here, they've raised issues that they are doing, and we're told that the food security and food safety issues were escalated to the office of the Deputy Presidency. And as we'll be interacting, we just thought it would be earlier for us to call the Deputy President, who has just come in to come and tell us about why we have this situation when we were supposed to have done 1, 2, 3, 4. So we request or we mandate you or instruct the departments represented here to sort yourself out. This thing of bureaucracy every day being raised in meetings, delaying implementation of programs of government, it's a problem. Those agencies that should be established need to be established because as the acting DGs indicated, the Border Management Agency has been established, been prioritized. We need to capacitate those agencies as we established. And in the report, there was the issue of laboratory, which is still we've got problem with, and the issues that we said that the department, and we were told by the Department of Agriculture that constantly they are working with the scientists in the universities, and this work, and indeed, we're told that South African will have got best scientists in food securities. So let's utilize them, work with them, and they've raised even number of things that it's very difficult to operate with department because Department of Health would request this. As they are finalizing, they give the report. The other department will come and say, do the same thing with different names. And the importance of government for elevating these issues and escalate them to the Deputy President's office was to bring both departments together and be able to respond to issues of food security and safety in a coherent manner. So we would expect, as we interact with yourself in the next meeting, after 3 months, we'll be calling you, but in various departments, we'll be briefing each committees on the progress. But after 3 months, we'll need to come back again as this forum to check how far are we, what is the plan of action. At that time, we'll include the Department and Planning and Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency because they were the ones that were leading the delegation in that previous meeting. So we want to thank you, Minister Davis and Minister Zokwane, for availing yourselves, and Deputy Minister. We really appreciate your availability and please let's do our best to make sure that our people are safe. We cannot justify one death in our society, so we have to do much more to prevent any death in this country. So thank you very much for coming, and have a good Easter and enjoy prayers because it's time for praying. Those that are going for festival, unfortunately. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Modlestilo.
There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation.
Thank you,
please be seated. Order. Order. Start my work first, please. That the whippery has before we proceed,
Point of concern by the economic freedom fighters. It has come to our attention, Honorable Chair.
You are stating a point of order. We don't have points of concern.
Yes, point of order. My apologies. It has come to our attention, Chair, that now is the second term for oral questions to Deputy President. That as a party we have submitted 2 questions, but neither of those questions were put in an order paper. So we want to raise this concern that has persisted for now is for the second term. We are making you aware that we are not happy about what has transpired in terms of our questions as a party.
Thank you. That point is noted, honorable members. We have had concerns about our questions office. Advocate Pindela, Secretary to the NCOP, I am sure you are listening. We will attend to that, ma'am. It should not happen. I do know that we have a rotational but also a proportional representation of questions on our question paper. Surely by now, if the EFF keeps on contributing questions, they should be. We will attend to that. Honourable members, I then want us to proceed to the questions as they are printed on our questions paper. And I call on the Deputy President to respond to the first question, which is a question by the Honourable L.C. Dlamini to the Deputy President. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, for the opportunity accorded to me. The response to the first question, it says as follows. As a developmental state, our transformative agenda of the state and the economy requires public service cadres that are caring, skilled, professional, responsive, and committed. For that to be realized,